Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Rest assured we'll be catching up with events in Brighton. So I was just described Emily Thornberry as going full David Brent on the podium at the Labour Party conference. We'll find out what that means later with Theo Usherwood, who is currently having a little bit of a paddle with a handkerchief on his head, but will be joining us at about 12:45. He's not. He's working very hard. I love this policy. I've got to be honest with you. But I sometimes wonder whether policies that get described as leftish do always fail the plausibility test. There's a degree of idealism involved in left-wing politics, what historically has been described as left-wing politics. I don't mean that as a criticism of anybody who doesn't like left-wing politics. In many ways, it's a criticism of left-wing politics. People aren't very nice, often. If we needed any more evidence of that than we've been given over the last couple of years, then I can't help you. People are routinely looking for reasons to be angry, to be fearful. They like hurting people. They like the idea of scapegoating. They like the idea of well, I don't know really, kind of, we just elected Nazis in Germany. I don't really need to join the dots, do I? And what you get, the opposite of kind of fascism, when you have, not the opposite of fascism, because I think at its extreme fringes, communism and fascism are a lot closer to each other than they are to the rest of us. But people who think that if you just let, you know, that kind of Bill and Ted school of thought be excellent to each other, if you just give everybody a fair crack of the whip, they'll all essentially be decent. It's what most religions are built upon. It's what my religion is built upon, and in many ways it's what my politics is built upon. But it doesn't work. You need to have some regulations in place. You need to have some checks and balances in place on people, because if you've got 100 decent people, if you've got 99 decent people in the room and one sociopath, the sociopath's going to end up with the 99 people's life savings eventually. It doesn't matter how long it takes. You need to have checks and balances in place. It ties in with the Uber conversation we were having in the last hour. So that's the political principle. Economically speaking, I'm not economically illiterate, and I increasingly wonder whether the kind of Ponzi scheme that modern capitalism seems to represent, you cannot have infinite growth in a planet, on a planet with finite resources, and yet still we buy into this notion that infinite growth is possible. And sometimes this isn't a peculiarly British disease. I think it holds true everywhere. We somehow think, don't we, you and me, that we're not qualified to understand things, particularly economically. You sometimes say, oh, we'll leave that to the wonks and the experts. Then you get the opposite drive that's come up in recent years, that why are we listening to the experts? We should listen to Doris or Bob from the Dog and Duck. They know just as much about international monetary relations as the governor of the Bank of England does. That's your Brexit sort of school of thought, if you will. Mark Carney, what does he know? I was chatting to a bloke in the pub last night. He knows exactly what's going to happen with regard to that quantitative easing. So we've got that out there as well. That's odd, because that seems to be curiously self-harming, that school of thought. Why would I want to listen to people who know what they're talking about when I can listen to, you know, the voices in my head? That kind of school of thought is strange, arguably leading us into the mess that I think everyone knows we're in now. But why can't some of these policies that look idealistic also be plausible? This is, at the grand old age of 45, the next area of political fascination for me. Why can't, I mean, I don't mean divvying everything up from scratch, taking all the resources in a society, the kind of Marxist approach, if you will, and then divvying them all up so that everyone's got an equal stake. That doesn't seem to me to be fair. You can take me out and shoot me if you want, but I will never believe that a brain surgeon should get paid the same as a unskilled labourer. I just won't. I don't know why. I know it's unfair on people who lack the intellectual capacity ever to be a brain surgeon, but it just seems to me to be self-evident that some jobs will be more in demand than other jobs, and those jobs will generally get a little bit more money than the jobs that aren't in demand. What we've skewed is the people who work with money. People who work in finance, people who work in investment, they get so much money, so much more than they deserve, or anything that their talents and gifts qualify them for. And that seems to me to be at the heart of a lot of Jeremy Corbyn's appeal and John McDonnell's appeal. Just this simple idea that, no, we don't want to tear everything up and start again, but things have gone too far in one direction. I always talk to you about gaps. It's the gaps. Politics for me is all about gaps. I'm supremely comfortable with people earning loads more than me, and I'm supremely comfortable with people earning loads less than me. But I don't want the people earning loads less than me to have to go to food banks, right? It's pretty straightforward. And it seems to me the best way to ensure that the people earning less than me don't have to go to food banks is to take some money from the people earning loads more than me. And maybe take some money from me as well. But generally speaking, if the gap between the top and the bottom is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, we've got a problem. And the main reason why the gap between the top and the bottom is getting bigger and bigger and bigger is because the people at the bottom are forced, by the nature of our economic system, to give a lot of their money to the people at the top. Uber being a good example. 25% of those drivers, new drivers, 25% of their fare goes to investors, really. It's a fairly tight operation, Uber. So it builds everything. Payday loan companies. Payday loan companies. You know, we sat here, God, does anyone else look back fondly on the days when payday loan companies seemed like the most evil thing that could happen to our country? Payday loan companies where poor people were having to take out loans, and not all of them had to, but some did, and we're talking about them, having to take out loans at rates of interest that were borderline abusive. And yet they felt they had no choice. And because we all feel a little bit unqualified and we don't read the terms and conditions and we don't read the small print, you'd have people, I know someone who had a university degree in business studies who ended up in a hole to the payday loan company. She was taking off Peter to pay Paul and not realising where the money was going from, reached a point where you wouldn't even look at your own bank account because you were so frightened of what you were going to see. And ended up in all sorts of bother, all sorts of trouble, with a university degree in business studies. So God knows what chance you've got if you struggle to read and write, but someone's going to give you 500 quid or 100 quid until the end of the month. And then at the end of the month, it gets renewed and you have to go to another company. And some of the stories we heard on this programme will stay with me as long as I live, because I had such epic sympathy for how easily you could fall into that hole. Credit cards are a little bit different. Not least because quite often we throw a credit card at a problem because it makes us feel like a high roller. If you had to really pin down the essence of that old adage about spending money we haven't got on things we don't need to impress people we don't like, the credit card would be the facilitator. The credit card would be the lightsaber of that school of thought. How can you spend money you haven't got on things you don't need to impress people you don't like? Credit card, James. Bada bing, bada boom. Stick it on the plastic, my flexible friend. Would it surprise you to know at the age of 45 that I have never had a credit card? Ever. Not even as a student. Why not? Don't know, really. My dad kind of turned me against them. There have been times where I think Mrs. O'Brien has cleverly used those 0% interest deals to shift the balance along or move the mortgage or whatever it may be. I have never had a credit card, and the reason for that is simple. I am an idiot. And when I was young, which is when they started offering them to you on such an incredible... Do you remember when you were young, especially if you went to university or college, they see you as a good bet, so they'd just bombard you with offers on credit cards. In fact, my friend who ended up in trouble with the payday loan companies was still paying off student credit cards in her mid-30s. So I never took out a credit card for the very simple reason that I'm an idiot. So I know that if someone had said to me on Friday lunchtime when I was at college, oh, we're all going to Glastonbury, or we're all off to Amsterdam, or we're all going to do this, and I would have said, I haven't got any money, wait there, I'll stick it on the plastic, I'd have done it. Almost everybody I know did. This is the one area of my life, in fact, I can't believe I don't boast about it more, it's the one area of my life where I've displayed what could be loosely described as fiscal responsibility. It was a combination of my dad having an almost preternatural fear of credit cards and me knowing that I'm an idiot. Maybe it was my dad's knowledge that I'm an idiot that led him to indoctrinate me so completely in the evil of the credit card. Because I could have left college with, I don't even know what the numbers are like. What would be a reasonable amount of credit card debt to leave university with? £30,000? I don't know. They'd let you take anything back in those days. This is the early 90s. And then you pay interest on the interest. This is the most incredible thing. I think this is what compound interest means. It was invented by the Medicis in about 14th century Florence. And what it meant was, if I lend you 10 quid with say a 10% rate of interest, so at the end of the year you owe me 11 quid. And you might have paid me back, but you're now paying me 10% on 11 quid. So I'm getting more money out of you every single time. And if you're paying off your minimum every month, you are shoveling money forevermore into the gaping gob of international finance. At what point do I start sounding like a communist? Because I'm not. Credit's great. It's the only way you can buy today what you'd otherwise have to wait for until tomorrow, and you can pay a little bit back over the duration, and it's still yours. So credit is by no means evil in and of itself. But the freedom that we've given to lenders seems to me to be immense. So John McDonnell will today announce plans to help, and just think about these words, more than 3 million people in Britain who are paying far more in interest payments than they borrowed in the first place. I don't buy, I'm afraid, into the notion that it's your own stupid fault. You should suck it up. Because I believe in society, and I believe in civilization. I believe that they shouldn't lend you money if they know you're not good for it. The 2008 global international financial crisis was brought about by people lending money that they knew couldn't be repaid. And we took it, and I mean, even worse, we put up with stagnant wages for a generation, 2 generations arguably, because our property was going up in value. So if you could get a mortgage to buy a property, even if you weren't a good bet, you could get the mortgage. So you didn't complain about the fact that your wages hadn't gone up, and then lo and behold, 2008 comes along, you lose your house. That's what happened up and down America. But John McDonnell today will lay out plans which would make it illegal for a credit card company to charge you more in interest than you had borrowed in the first place. Okay? Or actually, it's not quite that generous. It would be a total cap, meaning people would not have to pay back more than twice the amount of their credit card borrowings. So you borrow 500 quid, you're not going to have to pay back more than £1,000. 2 questions for you. I am a bit thick, okay, or at least I'm a little bit insecure. I don't have confidence, as perhaps I should, as a graduate of the London School of Economics. When I look at something and like this and think, why can't we just do it? I'm conscious that there are probably voices that explain why. And if you're one of those voices, tell me. 0345 606 0973. I would love you to rational or justify my somehow, amazingly, because I've fallen into almost every other trap that life throws at us. Somehow the credit trap. I messed up on my student loan, but actual credit cards, somehow I've managed to avoid that. I have friends who just have a 25 grand debt that's almost like a sort of monkey on their back, and they pay the minimum amount, and it's been there for years. It's been there since college. If that's you, have you ever worked it out? Have you ever worked out? Let's see if we can find a winner. And I'm here to offer you a sympathetic cuddle. If you've actually worked out how much you've paid back, not on a payday loan company, that's different, but you've got a 30% APR. You could have borrowed £1,000 and paid back, well, theoretically 30 grand. Have you done that? How deep a hole have you dug? And should it be the job of government to take away your spade? 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. So just to be clear, you'd have a total cap. So if you would not have to pay back more than twice the amount of your credit card borrowings. So regardless of how you do it, even if you're only doing the minimum payment every month, once that adds up to double what you borrowed, the debt is gone. What is wrong with that? How can anybody object to having a cap upon a loan set at 100% profit for the lender? I borrow 500 quid off you, I will not have to pay back more than 1,000. It's just beautiful. It's politics of decency, isn't it? 0345 606 0973. Correspondent Incorrigible FCA puts it better than I did, and I mean, this is his world, the world of finance. Expansion of consumer credit has been disastrous for the UK. Its profitability is now the key driver of our economic growth. It's true that, actually. Just as an aside, people citing the Canadian trade deal as something we could seek to emulate. Canadian trade deal doesn't look at services, which is an astonishingly high proportion of our economy now. It's a barely regulated sector that eviscerates the incomes of the poor in order to service the returns on concentrated capital wealth. And he goes on to approve of John McDonnell's proposals for that reason. And it seems to me to be clear that credit cards, kind of not unlike payday loan companies, have over generations now been a way for people with less to give more of it to the people who started off with more. So what's wrong with the proposal? Simply and politely, What's wrong with a proposal that simply says, if you borrow £1,000, you can't pay back more than £2,000? 0345 60 60973. Alex is in Leon C. Alex, what do you think?
Good morning. I disagree with the proposals simply because I don't think it will work properly. And I think there's two ways that you can actually deal with the credit issue. The first one is actually education. And I think you should have some basic financial education in schools so people understand how financial products like credit cards and mortgages...
It's not either or, though, is it? It's not. Tell me why you don't think McDonald's proposals would work.
Because, like, some of us, we get lots of benefits from our credit cards, and as such, they have a high rate of interest attached with them. If you're smart, you never pay the interest, but you get the benefits because of the high level of interest is there.
That's not telling me why this wouldn't work, because the people you've just described wouldn't even fall foul of this cap anyway. Why would not? Well, just make it illegal, because it's worked to a degree with payday loan companies. If you borrow £1,000 on a credit card, once you've paid back £2,000, the debt is gone, regardless of what other terms and conditions might have been in place and what interest rates you were paying. Once you've paid £2,000, you've paid off the debt. How could that not work?
Well, I think his proposals will limit the type of credit cards and range of credit cards that are available.
Good.
I think a better proposal would be to make it, for lenders to have stronger criteria before they give someone a credit card.
But did you hear the call in about Uber in the last hour? Were you listening? I don't know if you were.
I was listening.
What did we say? What was the conclusion that we all agreed on? Is that these outfits will never do anything for the greater good or the good of the customer. They will only act when they're forced to.
I'm not disputing that, but the specific proposal that he's come up with, limiting the amount that can be paid back, I think that's the wrong way to do it.
I know you do, but you haven't really told me why. I mean, I agree with you about education. Martin Lewis, who will be in charge of money under my glorious rule when I become emperor of these islands, Martin Lewis, incredibly strong on how important it is to teach people in school about what you've described. I don't see it as either or. What I'm interested in now is genuinely addressing the problem of people being skinned alive by credit card companies. And what would you do instead of this? Education notwithstanding, you're not going to be able to make the companies be more rigorous and have tougher criteria unless you do it by law, and this seems to me to be the best criterion of all, doesn't it?
Well, I think the most important thing is limiting the amount that people can borrow. Some people have issues paying back their credit cards, but the credit card companies will still just suddenly give them an extra few £1,000s of credit.
Yes.
And I think that's where people get into difficulty, because some people have the mentality, oh, I've got an extra £3,000 to go out and spend now.
Yes, and they end up paying back 20, but under this proposal, they'd only ever have to pay back 6. So how can that not be a step in the right direction?
Because it will reduce the number of credit cards available on the market, and those of us who actually know how to use credit cards properly...
Well, no. People who use credit cards properly pay a lot of money to the credit card companies. If it wasn't for them, people like you couldn't do what you do, which is cleverly move your balances around and move out before the offer period is extended and take out a new card with the old balance on it because it's interest-free for 9 months. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but forgive me for suggesting that the reason why you don't want this brought in is that all of the people whose penury and usury is currently subsidising your interest-free lifestyle, you want them to carry on being exploited and oppressed so that you can carry on enjoying your interest-free lifestyle. That's all I'm hearing, Alex.
It's not to do with interest-free. A lot of the...
all right, well, when you say benefits, whatever it might be, you got a lovely wall chart and a piggy bank. But that's the point, isn't it? The people who are getting skinned subsidise your so-called proper use of credit cards.
The two things I've suggested, if those are properly implemented, I think people wouldn't get exploited.
Yeah, and you'd still be able to benefit from whatever tiny bit of exploitation was left over. Do you honestly think that if there was nobody paying back 30 grand on a £5,000 debt, they'd be able to offer up the kind of deals that you take advantage of?
Well, yes, because you get the benefits because of the charges that the card company charges retailers.
you get the benefits because they've got so much money in the bank they can cast their net as widely as they humanly can, and people like you get caught up in the net and benefit from it, but the massive majority of people caught up in the net don't. I may have misunderstood you, in which case I apologise, but I don't think I have. 12:27, Simon's in Wimborne. Simon, what do you reckon?
I think I'm not a Labour fan, but I absolutely agree with McDonald this time. I've never owned a credit card, in my life.
High five. High five, Simon. You and me both. Bing, chang, chang-a-tang. Well done. Carry on.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I've had to take a credit card out because I'm going on holiday to South Africa in 2 weeks and I can't hire a car unless I've got a credit card.
That's why Mrs. O'Brien has one, but I'm not allowed to use it.
Absolutely. And I have lots of friends who are horrified and cannot believe that I don't own a credit card and have never owned one.
But it's perfectly... Can I run you through something that a person not a million miles away from this studio was offered in their first week at university? Ready?
Yeah.
Capital One, £6,000 on a credit card. Halifax, £1,500 on a credit card. Two store cards, one for £800 worth of credit, one for £150 worth of credit. £3,600 on a Blue American Express card, £2,000 overdraft facility, £7,000 car financing loan, £1,000 Barclay card. That's in the first week at university, and the silly sausage took it all out. And people think we're stupid for not having credit cards.
Well, I've thought I've never needed one until I came up against this. And actually, because I'm self-employed, the rigmarole of actually getting a crappy credit card for 1,500 quid to cover my car hire, honestly, I couldn't believe the rigmarole I had to go through.
No, well, I guess it changes, doesn't it, depending on where the economy is and how desperate they are for your customer. And also, they've clearly got you marked down because someone's never had a credit card. It'd be harder for you to get one than it would be for someone who got 6 credit cards and was paying off the minimum every month. They're paying off the minimum every month. They'll give you another one. What's not to like about this? And bon voyage, Simon, enjoy your holiday. I may have misunderstood Alex, in which case, as I said at the time, I would retrospectively apologise. But what's not to like? I mean, this is everything, isn't it? This is everything about politics. You struggle to understand the appeal of Jeremy Corbyn. This policy should be the key for you to unlock at least that understanding. It doesn't mean you're going to think that he's necessarily the man to deliver it or that you're going to suddenly have a Damascene conversion and start waving a little Jeremy Corbyn flag. But look, this is a decent person. 6,000, 7,500, 8,000, 8,100, 4,000, 12, 13, 15, 17, 23,000 pounds or thereabouts. Offered. Now, they wouldn't offer that unless they knew there was a realistic chance that they're going to get paid back 3-4 times that amount. If it was enshrined in law that they can only get 100% back, then these offers will disappear overnight, and families up and down the country will not be living under the spectre of repossession and eviction. 12:30 is the time. There's a lot in this speech of John McDonnell. We'll catch up with Theo Usherwood and its contents shortly. Key among the proposals currently being outlined are caps upon what credit card companies can take off you after you've borrowed from them. In many ways, the fact that there is no limit. How many people? No, just me. There's no limit on credit card debts. It's amazing when you think about it. If you actually can step back from reality, or step back from the quotidian, from the daily existence, some of the stuff that we just don't notice because it's normal and it's always happened is weird. There is no limit on how much money you could... If you borrow £10 on a credit card tomorrow, there is no limit on how much you could end up paying back, except the length of your life. And even then the debt gets passed on to someone else. It's not unlike this. I mean, it's gaslighting, isn't it, in a political sense? A few of you are asking why we haven't spoken more about the result in Germany. I can't yet. I mean, you know, Nazis are back in the Bundestag. But I'll say one thing about it that seems to perhaps have gone unnoticed. You know, this utterly despicable attempt to claim that having reservations, fears, evidence-based objections to Brexit is somehow unpatriotic. You've heard this phrase. Andrea Leadsom used it first, I think, and others have weighed in subsequently. I'm not putting Andrea Leadsom on this page, but if you, on social media or in your exchanges with people of different political views, you look at anybody who's tried to argue that being troubled by Brexit is somehow unpatriotic, and the crossover between them and the AFD is incredible. People who will play a bogus patriotism card in the context of Brexit seem to think that the election of actual Nazis in Germany is a good thing, a vindication of their political stance. So you now have people who would accuse someone like me of being unpatriotic, okay, but who also simultaneously support or welcome the election of a party to the Bundestag, their first seats in the Bundestag, with a leader who says we have the right to be proud of the accomplishments of German soldiers in 2 world wars. So I'm unpatriotic, right? Because I don't think Brexit is going to be good for us. I think it's going to be bad for almost all of us. It'll probably be good for the people that own the papers that were used to persuade us to do it. It's going to be bad for everybody else. That's what I believe. You can call me unpatriotic, that's fine, I've got thick skin. But if you then simultaneously move from that ludicrous patriotism line on Brexit to being, you see, right-wing populism, you see, it's all the Liberals' fault. Actual Nazis getting elected in Germany, and you're not outraged by it. How can you be the patriot? How can the patriot be the one that's cool with the AfD? How can the patriotic position be the one that is somehow encouraged by the election of Nazis in Germany? I know there are a lot of riddles in politics at the moment. There's also the other question about Brexit betrayal, which has started coming out. Boris Johnson how come they're not talking the country down when they describe Theresa May's efforts in a negative sense? How come I'm talking the country down when I say that looks like a bit of a mess, but when Boris Johnson does it, he's somehow defending Brexit? Do you understand that? 2 little questions for the week, class. I'll be marking your homework on Friday. First one is, how can it be patriotic to be on the same side of an argument as Nazis, given you know what Nazis did to British soldiers, let alone the blinking gas chambers. You know what they did to British soldiers during the Second World War, but somehow it's good news that a party that thinks they should stop being ashamed of the Nazi era is back in the Bundestag. So patriotism in the context of Nazism versus Brexit, question number 1. Question number 2 is, how come it's not talking the country down when psycho Brexiteers start slagging off what Theresa May is doing, but it is talking the country down when evidence-based, rational journalists and other politicians do so? Just 2 more little bits of evidence slowly building up that eventually will constitute, well, pretty much a case that no one can dispute, at which point you stick your fingers firmly in your ear, close your eyes and just start shouting, I don't know, traitor. 12:39 is the time. Sorry, Dishal, you weren't expecting that when you were stuck on hold by Caroline. Steer me back to credit cards. Steer me back to John McDonnell. What's wrong with this proposal?
So, well, basically, all I want to say is I used to work for a bank, credit card company, and I used to promote credit cards to customers. Now, loads of people used to come in. My mum, for example, she always told me, no, stay away from credit cards, they're really bad.
Yeah.
Most elderly customers, middle-aged customers, was like, no, I don't want a credit card because it's really bad for you. All the young people that used to come in, they used to say...
He's gone. Nick's in Sheffield. Nick, what would you like to say?
Hi, no, first-time caller.
You're very welcome. I'm doing well in Sheffield. I seem to get a lot of calls from Sheffield. It's my mum's hometown. That must be why. She's spread the word. Carry on, Nick.
Very good. No, as I say, just thinking about the credit cards, really, I got myself in a bit of debt. Nothing huge in comparison to what I've heard from people.
Well, how much? Can I ask how much? Do you mind?
It was around 17,000.
So it's a hell of a lot of money, mate, isn't it? I mean, after tax, it's more than the national average income in a year.
It adds up.
It does add up. You can say that again. Go on.
It was over 2 credit cards. I never missed a payment on any of them, but as you say, it was just paying the interest every month. And when I took them out, I just had a young family, so trying to pay all that off.
Yes.
And the issue was I wasn't paying it off, so I ended up going into another form of paying debt off, known as an IVA.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great idea at the time. End of this month will be the final month of payments, and I'll be out of it, luckily. But it's a long time ago, so 6 years.
Yes. And
it's destroyed my credit. I'm trying to move house with my wife. I'm in a decent job that pays relatively well, but I'm in an awful position. And I did the typical thing that kind of some men do, bury my head in the sand.
Not just men, but I know what you mean. Because we think, so it's Mr. McCorber, isn't it? Something will come up, something will come up, something will come up, and then it doesn't, and then the tide goes out, and you're screwed, not to put too fine a point on it. What were you spending the money on? Because I've got a sort of particular interest in students who ran up 25, 30 grand debt just to really just get pie-eyed and go to Glastonbury. What were you spending yours on when you were running up 17 grand's worth of debt?
Probably not Glastonbury, but I don't have anything to show for it either.
No.
So, as I say, if I wanted to go on holiday with the lads,
yeah,
or I wanted to purchase some new clothes, I would do so with that, and I would say I'd pay it back at the end of the month, which I never did.
No, exactly. And you never had to, and it just added up. Have we got any idea of that £17,000, how much you will have paid back by the time you're clear?
Oh gosh.
Or do you not want to think about it?
If it's not treble, I'd be surprised. It's
and that is the normal experience, and we've sat here for years and just sort of let it happen to us. I don't know what it's like in other countries. I'm hearing reports that in Germany it's quite a carefully regulated market, and nobody could ever end up in the sort of bother you ended up in. And you're right, and we got nothing to show for it either. Maybe clothes, mostly socialising. My friend who ended up in all sorts of bother. It was just going out. Literally, Friday, we're going out, and nobody should underestimate the importance of the lesson. No, we can't afford it. You try and teach it to your children. Do you know one of the toughest things about having a few quid, being slightly better off as a parent than perhaps your own parents were when you were young? So when Mum and Dad said to us, we can't afford it, it was true, because, you know, Dad was driving a Morris Marina and we didn't go on holidays, and so a lot of our friends had much smarter houses or swimming pools and stuff like that, because Mum and Dad sent us both to private school, and we would have been, you know, among the less well-off people at private school. But when you've got a few quid, and possibly, you know, your kids are knocking around with kids who got a bit less than you, the hardest lesson is to teach them that you can't afford stuff. Because you sort of can. in theory you can, but you can't afford it. And I don't know how my dad drilled that into me, because he wasn't good with money. I didn't realise how bad he was with money until I had to go through all his papers after we lost him. But somehow he drilled into me the ability to say, I can't afford it. So Friday, college, 1992, we're all off to Amsterdam this weekend. Sorry, lads, I can't afford it. I actually can't afford it. I don't have enough money. And now I realise, looking back, nor did they. They were piling it on the plastic at every single turn. And like Nick, they'd have ended up borrowing 20, paying back 60, if not more. Sam's in Finchley. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Sam.
It's first-time caller, a bit nervous, sorry.
Everyone's a first-time caller today. I'm very touched. Don't be nervous. It's only me. I don't bite.
Oh. Thank you. What I wanted to say is, I mean, in principle, I support this idea of limiting the interest to, say, 100% of the debt borrowed. But first of all, where does that 100% figure come from? Why can't it be more? Why can't it be less?
Oh, come on. I mean, it's a good figure. It's a nice round number. It's 100. It's 100%. You can't get any rounder than that, except zero.
But say it is. But say we wanted to save people more money. Say we wanted to go less than that. Wouldn't you think that more people who already pay lots of interest are going to go, wow, fantastic, I can count my interest? And all of a sudden they're going to be paying even more because they're borrowing more. But
yes, I take your point, but I don't think that it would be... I don't think it would be abused in that fashion. There'll be limits. And also, if the credit card companies aren't making money hand over fist out of you, they're going to look a lot more clearly at whether or not they want to lend you the money in the first place.
Well, I think that's actually a really good point, and that's why I think one of the other callers had a really great idea, but I think for the wrong reasons.
Go on.
I think what we should be looking at is the idea of restricting how much people can borrow instead, or maybe as well.
That should be in place. There should be restrictions on how much people can borrow, and you know, economic times like this, there are restrictions in place, but they go out the window when things look good again. And it was, of course, Margaret Thatcher who lifted regulation on all of this stuff. Prior to Margaret Thatcher, credit was highly regulated, but this notion that money makes money is at the very heart of this kind of neoliberal capitalism, and it's yet another example of it. But remember, low regulation, low tax economy. We've got too many regulations in place, which can see decent people like Nick up in Sheffield dropping 50 grand on a 17 grand debt. People like my friend and colleague here, 30 grand in the hole when they came out of college. Too much regulation. And we're still swallowing it. We'll return to this question of finances. It's interesting, isn't it? There's an element of forelock tugging to it. It occurred to me during the break. When you sort of look at, why would anybody defend the idea that if you borrow 10 grand, you should somehow end up paying back 50 grand? And it's sort of like, it's not for us, is it? It's not for the likes of us to question how things work. Strange times. And it was, of course, a speech that John McDonnell was in the process of delivering while we discussed it. Theo Ushwood wasn't listening to us, bless him. He was listening to John McDonnell instead. In fact, he's been listening to the speeches at Labour's conference in Brighton all morning. Theo, give us the highlights.
The highlight has to be John McDonnell's speech from just a few moments ago. He had a standing ovation in the main hall here at the conference centre in Brighton. He talked about a subject that you've been talking about, of course, which is capping credit card interest to the actual amount of the loan. And then there was this announcement on the private finance initiative. Remember, this was something that was brought in under Tony Blair to fund major infrastructure projects where private companies could borrow money to build hospitals, to build schools, and then pay that money back. And there was a feeling that many of these deals, the way they were structured, meant that the taxpayer was, in a way, as John McDonnell put it, subsidising the profits of shareholders who owned these particular private, had the finances, so to speak. John McDonnell said today that he would bring those PFI deals back in-house under government control, and there would be no more of them if Labour get into power.
The scandal of the Private Finance Initiative, launched by John Major, has resulted in huge long-term costs for taxpayers, whilst handing out enormous profits for some companies. Profits which are coming out of the budgets of our public services. Over the next few decades, nearly $200 billion is scheduled to be paid out of public sector budgets in PFI deals. In the NHS alone, 830 million in pre-tax profits have been made over the last 6 years. As early as 2002, this conference expressed its regret at the use of PFI. Jeremy Corbyn has made it clear that under his leadership, never again will this waste of taxpayers' money be used to subsidise the profits of shareholders. And you know, many of those companies and shareholders are based in offshore tax havens. The government could intervene immediately to ensure that companies in tax havens can't own shares in PFI companies and their profits aren't hidden from HMRC. So let me give you this commitment. We'll put an end to this scandal and we'll reduce the costs to the taxpayers. How? Well, we've already pledged that there will be no new PFI deals signed by us in government, but we'll go further. And I can tell you today, it's what you've been calling for. We'll bring existing PFI contracts back in-house. We're bringing them back. We're bringing them back.
Big applause there for John McDonnell. During the election, when Jeremy Corbyn launched the manifesto, made a big play on Labour plans to nationalise the railways, the water utilities, and even the Royal Mail as well. John McDonnell put more flesh on the bones of these policies this morning.
Building an economy for the many also means bringing ownership and control of the utilities and key services into the hands of the people who use them and work in them. So yes, I want people to have no doubt. Rail, water, energy, Royal Mail, we're taking them back.
The other big speech was Emily Thornberry, the shadow Foreign Secretary. She got a rousing reception here in the main hall. Of course, she's been touted as a joint deputy leader here for Labour. She had this gag at the expense of her opposite number, Boris Johnson.
I know that Boris doesn't like paternity tests, but maybe we need one for Brexit. Maybe we should take him into a studio with Jeremy Kyle. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. We got the results back, and it looks like this one's one of yours. It must have been that wild night out you had with Michael Gove. And I've calculated your maintenance payments, and that'll be £350 million a week.
Or there would have been a time, perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, when a left-wing Labour politician standing up at conference and saying that they were going to borrow more money would have brought about howls of derision from the Conservatives. I don't think that will happen now, following these comments from Dennis Skinner.
The party is alive and well and kicking. And that's why today we have to get rid of those zero-hour contracts. And that's what we have to promise. And if anybody says to you, where's the money coming from, I'll tell you. We're going to borrow it. And that's what you do. And make a comparison with the private sector. When the private sector expands, where do you think they get the money from? They borrow it. They borrow it. And they don't take it out of their own.
Dennis Skinner there delivering a big speech. And of course, for the Conservatives now, with that promise from George Osborne, David Cameron, to, of course, eliminate the deficit, that's not going to be until mid to late 2020s. They'll probably get away with that one today.
Have you finished?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of complaints.
Too long?
No banter. They turned my microphone off while you were doing it. You just did this long spiel like a sort of, proper journalist.
No, you can interrupt me anytime, James.
Axel turned the microphone off. I had all sorts of banter planned.
Well, if Axel, I don't know, what can you tell Axel?
There's fury out there. No one's going to be left listening for Sheila Fogarty.
Oi. Oi. Well, is there something I got wrong? Is there something you can criticise me for?
But people expect banter, We're Batman with the Batman and Robin of LBC, mate. And they feel that the boy wonder just sort of possibly reached his...
I went too far.
Role. I don't know. It wasn't your fault. It was Axel. Axel turned my microphone off.
Well, look, tomorrow, just interrupt me anytime, slap me down, knock me about a bit. It's a bit like we're back at school and...
That's what they want, mate.
Give the masses what they want.
Give the people what they want.
Just like the Labour conference.
Two things briefly.
Yes.
I think you might be right. I think the magic money tree is still going to be all over the newspapers tomorrow, don't you? Dennis Skinner's intervention notwithstanding.
Perhaps.
We shall see. And the second thing is these. I mean, I appreciate conference and opposition is all about having your cake and eating it, but bringing PFI contracts back in house under the terms of the actual contracts that were signed and would be legally binding, that's going to involve the kind of windfalls that no party's going to get past the electorate, I suspect.
Cold sweats.
Yes.
I think will be there will be some cold sweats about that one because, of course, yes, you're quite right to pick on it. Bringing them back in house, and that goes back to what people have been talking about quite a lot at this conference when it comes to the utility companies and what do you pay the shareholders of those companies? Do you pay them what they paid for those stakes, or do you pay them less? Are people going to see what's it going to mean for pension plans?
Recourse to the law as well. I mean, these are legally binding contracts that if you break them will involve paying out enormous sums of money. And finally, I now understand why one commentator, I think it was Ian Dunt, whose work I happen to think is quite brilliant, he said that Emily Thornberry had gone peak David Brent. I think I know what he means, having heard the clips you selected.
Yes, she does have that sort of style that is she's trailed it before and used it. I would also mention that Keir Starmer gave a speech, or Sir Keir Starmer gave a speech. He gave an expert lesson of using half an hour to say absolutely nothing. If you want to watch a demonstration of peak obfuscation, watch Sir Keir Starmer at the Labour Party conference, unable to say anything because, of course, the disagreements about Brexit, and he did exactly that.
He'll go far. Theo Usherwood giving an object lesson in how to say an awful lot in a short amount of time with a relatively small number of words. That's it from me for another day.